Rucham Aboim b'Shem Hashem b'Shem Irgenshir Torah everyone to say shir from Rabbi Yakov to Smith on the Kabel Schar for the Honos Mimer Torah, benefiting from Torah learning, halachic perspective. Rabbi Smith.
This past Hazmanim, we had a bochur asked me this question with great tmimus. He went to one of these Hazmanim programs and they paid him afterwards, and he wanted to know, is there anything wrong with taking money? He heard epis that there's an issue of taking money for learning. And if there's nothing wrong, does it maybe lose his schar if he takes money? And this really struck a responsive chord in my mind, because something I always wanted to go through to learn. It's more than just epis, as we'll soon see. It's a big sugya that some hold it's taka also to take money for learning. And there are many other nafkaminas about rabbanim and kollel and taking presents and giving prizes to boys to learn. And it's a simple question about benefiting, not just enjoying learning, but financial gain, covet, which is really a global issue. So I get to Klal Yisrael. I know my place. I'm not going to tell you my own opinions. I don't have opinions. I'm going to just present the Chazal as we see it. And if someone knows differently, please correct me. I'll be glad to correct myself. But basically, this is something, everything else we have to learn the sugya. It's a beautiful sugya. The main challenge, I think, is typically when we have a sugya, we say, Iba yisei mekra, Iba yisei mesvar. In other words, first of all, al pi svara, in mutter. And also we found rayas. And them is once you have a lamali kra svara. Svara is very compelling. In this particular question, it's very rare, but we find that Iba yisei mekra sends you one way, Iba yisei mesvar sends you the opposite direction entirely. And I'll explain. Iba yisei mesvar. Is it mutter for a Talmid Chacham, a younger man, a Rabbi, a Rav, to take money for his learning, for his teaching? Why not? What do you expect him to do? You know, there's a machlokes in brachas, daf lamed hey. We pass like Rabbi Shmuel, v'safu deganecha, that the Gemara says, very sadly, that harba asu krabshim b'yechai v'loi also be adam. Not everybody can be abshim b'yechai and wait to expect to get, panosah delivered to his doorstep. Harbas of Shmuel will also be Adam. And Takat Masha points out the average person is not allowed to do it like Rabbi Shimon Yechai. Okay, some did it. Harbas of also, but some do. But we paskin, you have to go make panasa. And once you have to make panasa, what do you expect to do if you're learning and not taking money? Don't forget the Mechaba quotes the Gemara in Kedushin Chav Testament Beis that today's simon is Reish Mem Vav. The Mechaba in Siv Beis says that a person has to realize that Rechaim al Tzavar v'Yasik b'Torah is a tremendous Nisayan. So you can't just say, I'm not going to take money, I'm going to learn, because he won't learn for too long. And maybe, perhaps, a proof that you're allowed to take money is from the oldest Hachzakas Torah. And that's the famous Yissachar Zevulun partnership. The Torah speaks about it, the Medrash expands on it. We find the Gemara that there was other people, Shimon Achei Azariah. So if they took money for learning, why can't we? But the point really is to understand that al pi svara, it just can't work. And it's noteworthy. The Rambam and the Mechaba quotes him in the beginning of our Simmer Reish Mem Vav. He says about the Chi of Talmud Torah, it's all inclusive. Everybody's chayiv. Bein ani, bein asher, shalom begufay, bein bal yisurim, bein bochur, bein zokein. Everybody. And then he goes, afilu. And what was the biggest chiddush to the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch? More than Bal Yisurim, Choyel, Zaken? You know what it is? I feel the Bal Ishu Banim. When you have to raise a family and you have to juggle Torah and Panasa, good luck. But the Pella is, on this Mechaba, the Shulchan Aruch continues. He says, but what could you do if you have such a big job and you have no time or you don't have the cup for it? You make Yissachar Zevulun. So really, the original Yissachar Zevulun was not made to support the Yissachar. It was to help the Zevulun. Otherwise, by Mezachi, what's his claim to Elam Haba? But Lamaisa, it's definitely al pi svara that a person has to take money. Another possible raya, the famous Rambam that warms our heart in the end of Hilchos Shmita v'Yovel, The Ram says, they're not the only ones that have the special relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem and Us Chelkoi, but anybody who decides that he wants to devote his life to learning, the Baruch will take care of him, Hashem Chelkoi v'nachlasoi, v'yiskolei b'olam hazeh, davar maspik loi. So the Rambam is saying if someone wants to learn, the Baruch will take care of him. What does he mean? L'chayri means to say someone will support him. So we definitely could say Iboyi say Masvara that there's no other choice. But then Iboyi say Mikra is extremely powerful. Listen to a Mishnah Avos, we all learn it. Avos Perek Dal Mishnah Hey. Al Tasem at Torah Liz Gadol Behem. Don't use Torah to make a crown for yourself, for your own covet. V'loi Kardom Lachba Behem Zokte Bein Yoina. Don't use the Torah for panasa. In fact, some agoris like kardom lechol behem. Don't use it for hanas moment. V'chein ha'hilaima u'dishtamesh betagah cholav. If you use the keser Torah, chas v'shalom, I don't want to say. But as if this is not enough, and if you have any doubts, the Mishnah makes a summary. Holy marata. What do we see from this Mishnah? Hanehna b'divrei Torah noitel chayev min ha'olam. Again, I don't want to teach that, but if you're nana from Torah, chas v'shalom, it's frightening. Kol hanehna b'divrei Torah, in any form, keser, toga, lechol behem. Actually, there's a second place in Avos Perek Aleph Mishnah Gimel u'dishtamesh b'toga cholav. So without doubt, this is what led the Rambam in the Yad in Hilchas Talmud Torah Perek Gimel halacha Yud to say his famous shita that is extremely, extremely powerful. Zok the Rambam, kol ha-meisim aliboy sheyasik b'Torah v'lo yasim halacha. Bispanas b'natziba v'n tzedakah. He's going to learn not do any jobs. It sounds very idealistic. He sounds like a real tzaddik. Zok the Rambam, harei zechilas Hashem ubizas ha-Torah ukava ma'or hadas v'gormro la'atzmai v'noitel chayim min olam haba. What we thought was this idealistic tzaddik, he's not going to work, he'll take money from tzedakah. Chil Hashem. Oy tziva v'amru, le'isasem ha-Torah l'zgadol behem, v'le'kordom lachba behem, v'oy tzivu, ahavas ha-malacha, sneis rabbonis, v'chol Torah she'ein me-malacha sofer b'teila, v'soif adam zeh she'yelistim, malastim es ha-briyos. The Rambam needs no explanation. The Rambam went with the Mishnah, hanehna b'dvei Torah, is chas v'shalom noit l'chayev, now, this is the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka. As if this is not enough, there's a Rambam in Pirsha Mishnayis on our Mishnah. And again, I've never seen the Rambam something even similar to this. The Rambam begins, I first made a haskama. I'm not going to talk about this subject because I know, and I quote, I know that Roiv Gedolei Torah, if not all of them, strongly disagree to what I'm saying. So I decided not to talk about it. But he says I must speak up. And look how determined he was. He knows he's a lone voice kipshuta. And with unusual arichos, usually it's bekitza in the Pirush Mishnayis, but he says that when a person looks into Chazal, you see how people lived in poverty and no one helped them. I don't believe they were very selfish or stingy. They had avas chesed, avas Torah. But obviously he says, and he brings many rayas, Hillel was a wood chopper, and Karna, who's a dayan, he was a water carrier, and Reb Chanina Mendoza suffered terrible poverty, and he has a number of other rayas, and he says, so why didn't anybody help him? The teretz is you can't take money for limud HaTorah. And then he says that we do find older people or cholim were helped, but b'derech klal, he quotes the more in Gittin Samach Zayin, Rabbi Yosef used to work in a mill, Rav Sheshis worked with carrying heavy boulders, heavy piece of wood, kshuri, and he says, basically, there's no heta for this. I'm just pillar play. Then he says, another big yisoid, and that's really one of his main rayas. The Gemara in the Dharm of Samach Beis says there was someone, a field owner, and people were stealing from his field. So he decided one night, I'm going to catch the ganav, and take care of him. Rab Tarfon, Haley Rab Tarfon, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was caught. He was walking, he was caught. So he put him in a bag, and he's going to throw him into the river and drown him. And Rab Tarfon innocently said, "Oi, Tarfon's going to die for no reason." And the person said, "Oh, I have Rab Tarfon, Haley Rab Tarfon," and he dropped him, and Rab Tarfon escaped. Zoktimar kol yomav shel oisei tzadik hayim mitztar al dov hazeh ama oili shenishtameshi bekisser shel Torah. And he quoted this Mishnah. Why did I say my name was Tarfon? Why did he free me? Because I'm Reb Tarfon. He didn't say, this is the Rashki Bahag. He said Tarfon without even a Reb. And Kol Yomav, it bothered him. I used the crown of Torah. So to Rambam, even that's awesome. And taking money. A second raya in Bava Basra, Daf Ches, during the Shnei B'Tzoyres, there was a terrible hunger. Rebbe opened up his warehouse of food. He says, if you know how to learn, Mikra Mishta, come. If not, don't come. So it happened to be that Rebbe had a Talmud, and this Talmud came, Rab Nachman, name was, and he came and he wanted food. So Rebbe said, do you know how to learn? No. Mikra, no. Mish, nothing. So he said, so why do you want food? He says, at least like an animal. And Rebbe gave him. And Rebbe felt terrible because he had a policy only for Talmidei Chachamim. So they told him, Rebbe's sons told him, don't feel bad. That was your Talmud. Why did he make this whole spiel? He must have disguised himself. Said he doesn't know how to learn. Zok the Rambam, obviously we see that it's also to take any preferential treatment for learning Torah. So the Rambam says the only heta, and he quotes 3 Gemaras in Brachas and in Psachim and Bava Basra, the only heta is to help a Talmid Chacham succeed in business. Get involved, buy the items, put them on the market, and those are 3 Gemaras, Ayin Sham, and being Makatik, we have a lot to do. But to help him succeed with his Parnasa, that yes. But to take money for learning, the Rambam concludes very clearly is asa. Now don't forget, this is the Rambam that says, I know all disagree, and he made a point both in the Yad, a very long shtickle, and in the Pirsha Mishnayos. And at the later generations, we find Lavush in Yeridei Reishma of Chavalev. He quotes the Rambam, Aval kol chachmei doirei v'gam aboim achreihem hisigu olav ma'oid. And he says that this is l'maisa the only way to do it. And this, Rabbi say, is the big machlok, is the Rambam versus other Rishonim. Now, here I could say that it could be a share for itself going through the different shittas, but we have a big agenda. I'm going to share with you 2 discussions, which I think does enough. The first one is one of the later Rishonim after the Rambam, that's the Tashbitz. Tashbitz in Chelik Aleph Siman Kuf Mem Ches. He begins with Grois Derech Eretz to the Rambam, the Ner Yisrael, and he basically says that, which is misquoted rather, he says, the Rambam was easy for him not to take money because he had a very prestigious job. He was the physician, the personal physician to the Sultan. He was the Bar Mazel, he had Panasa. What about the rest of us? What does Rambam expect us to do? Now, he wasn't trying to be sarcastic. I guess he felt that the Rambam didn't experience the difficulty, the impossibility of Rechaim al Tzvar v'Yasi b'Torah, so he could say that. But he wasn't trying to be cynical. But then he goes on, again, it's 4 long pages of the Tashbitz, and he says, he brings many rayas that they did take money. But what's interesting, both of the Rambam's main rayas, he says, is not a raya. The raya from Reb Tarfon, the Gemara Beferish says, he says, why was it mutter to do? Because he should have paid him off. Tarfon was a kavir. Why did he say his name is Tarfon? He said, you know what, stop, I'll do tshuva, I'll pay you back all the fruit. That's the Gemara says. So that's why it was taka awesome. It was F Shabbai Fanacha. The Gemara in Bava Basra, the Tashbitz Fakert. The fact that he says, I'm only giving Talmidei Chachamim, so who's going to come? If you can't give a Talmidei Chacham, who's going to come? And he goes on again, Barichas, and he says that basically, he makes a certain spalt. He says, Nena midvar Torah is mutter. Mishtamish bekisrei shel Torah, that's taka lacking. And he gives a few Shalom, Ayin Shah. But the point is, his main point is, that to use the Kesser Torah to exonerate yourself. Let's say a person did a hezek. That's his mashal. And he smashed someone's car. So he goes, I'm sure you're moichel me, I'm a Talmid Chacham, I'm a kollel, I'm a Rabbi, I'm a Rav, I can't pay all this money, I'm sure you're moichel me. That's a chil Hashem. That's the bezayin HaTorah. That's mishtamash b'kisur shel Torah. But when someone just takes basic support, that's nana, and then is mutter. This is the Tashbitz's major discussion. The second major discussion, a little later, one of the earliest achronim, the Kesef Mishnah, of course, on the Beis Yosef, on the Rambam. Again, it's both sides, a big arichas, but it's interesting the way he begins. Rabbeinu, Hirchiv, Piv, Ulashoinai, Bepirish, Hamishna, Avos. I don't want to touch that, but like he opened his mouth wide and he shot out, Piv, Ulashoinai. Now, right away, it was strange to me. We mentioned the other week that the Beis Yosef was zoicha to be the mechaba for doirei doiris because of his anava, his midas. And here, all of a sudden, the Rambam here chapiv l'shoinai. But I mean, is bar that he saw a tremendous threat. The Rambam had an unusual skula hatzlacha of dvar nishmoyim. Everybody followed his psak ad hayom. Chassidim, Sfardim, and Briskis, and Yeshiva light, every word of the every ois of the Rambam. And here the Rambam in two places says you can't take money. Torah matela. He felt this is going to deliver a crushing blow to Olam HaTorah. So he had to settle the score. He had to say that the Rambam is not a loch lamaisa. He had to totally reject the Rambam's sak. And he too discusses the rayas of the Rambam, very similar to the Kesef Mishnah, Ayin Sham. He goes through Rai after Rai and he brings his own Rayas lahakol. But a klal oily says, Shekol she'ein li ma lisparnes, mutter litel scharai, lilmaid, either privately or learning with Talmidim. And then he says that lamaisa, even if you have a suffix, but halacha is when you have a suffix, halacha minig. And this is definitely the minig. So it's a very unusual machlokes kamat mikotzel kotzel. The Rambam goes out of his regular approach and a das yochid mamish. The Rishonim take strong exception. The Achronim say that's the minig. How do we paskin? So Lamaisa the Ramah, the Machaba does not say a word. In Beis Yosef he talks, in Kesef Mishnah Oidis he talk, but in Shulchan he doesn't mention a word. Maybe I'll cover the Rambam. I'm not even sure. No, I didn't find anybody speak about it. But he makes no mention of this fundamental question. But in the Ramah, he first quotes the Rambam. Actually, he first says, Ma'al the Gedoyla, if you could work and learn, that's the best. But then he quotes the Rambam, and then he quotes his psak in Beis Yosef. He brings the Tashbitz, and he says, Nahagu b'chol mekoimois, that the Rav takes money, and those that learn with others take money. And he says, if you don't need the money, taka, let's say he's a big gevir, his shver is a big gevir, Rabbanim, some Rashivas are very wealthy, then Enecham don't take the money. But he says beferish that this is not only for teaching Torah, a Rabbanim or Rosh Yeshiva, but for learning Torah, which of course is the Yisachar for kollel. And then he basically says that, again, if a person could manage, fine, but he says, most can't manage. And Libi Yoimud, this is based on the Gemara and Brachas, Namahei and Beis, Harba Ask of Shem Ba'echayv, will also be Adam. So the Maisa, the Ramah, definitely paskins, not like the Rambam, and the Machaba certainly did that in the other two Svar. Comes again the Dvar Shmuel Abu Hav, in the Chuvas Kuf Lamed Ches, and it's so important that the Bialacha quotes the Lashon entirely. Quotes this exact lashon in Bialacha in Siman Kuf Lamed Hey, in Siman Kuf Nun Vav, and the Shmuel Abu Hav says that Ein Donan Efsha Mishi Efsha, and in our times he was an Achrain. If he wouldn't take money, they won't be learning. He believes even the Rambam agrees. Al Eitz Las Lashem, you're allowed to take money, and he says there's no other choice. Even the Rambam agrees. The Archaim HaKadosh in two svarim, one is the Rishon LeTziyah and the Sefer on Yeridea, and on the Sefer that he has on Chafetz Hashem on Brachos, Masech the Brachos Daf Ches, he says the exact same thing, that the Rambam was talking about in his time that was manageable. Today it's that or nothing, Avada, taking money, is better than nothing. And this is what he says, and I should add, one of the Achronim, I forgot who it was, he said, and besides, don't forget, the Mechaba quotes this in Siv Dalit, that the average Balabas whose works learns 9 hours a day. So with that Balabas, what's Talmid Chacham? But Lamaisa, to be a Talmid Chacham that's more than 9 hours and not take money, it doesn't work. So Lamaisa, the halacha, as I told you earlier, quotes the Dvar Shmuel. The Lavush, I think, puts it most Lamaisa. When he says, Yedu o meforsim, she'im loy hoyu oisin kain, kvanish takcha, Torah mi Yisrael, and it's only because of this incredible support of Klal Yisrael that there is Torah in his times. Now, of course, it's noteworthy to mention both the Mechab and the Ramah and this Sif Chaf Aleph, they begin with the most important part of this all. And that is, Ein Divrei Torah miskaimen b'misha misrapa atzmei aleim v'leim d'metoich idun u'mitoich achila u'shtia ela b'misha meimis atzmei aleim. Don't forget, that tzlacha is not taking money, not taking support. That tzlacha is being devoted. You know, the ikka is Kabbalah's all Torah, of working hard, of meimis atzmei. Grada, a person has to live. But to make it that support is in a way that he has everything and has no interest to learn is of course very self-destructive. So avada, a person has to be that Yissachar of Roivus Ben Mishpesayim and the Armenucha Yitay Vayetshich May Lizba. Avada, the Yissachar has to do his job, but the Zevulun's job today is Mutta L'chol Days. Now that we have basically the actual Yisachar, let's apply this from different shilas. We'll try to go in order. One thing I think is pashut, that a Rebbe, a Magachir, a Rosh Yeshiva, Mashkiach, who works with Talmidim, it's probably, or a Rav for that matter, it's probably easier to understand why it's Mutal L'chol Hadayis. The main part of the Rambam's objection was taking money for learning. You're making Torah into a business. He's a doctor, he's a lawyer, he's a carpenter, and he learns in kollel. It's making Torah billig. But if someone gets paid to do the work that he's working so hard for, that's nothing wrong, that's not a chil Hashem. And anybody who chinuch knows that chinuch today, as difficult as it always was, is even more difficult today. Every Talmud is a full-time job. My Matasio used to say a Rebbe has to wear many different hats. He's a Rebbe, he's a mashpia, he's a psychologist, he's a referee, he's a social worker, he's Baruch HaKodesh to know what's going on in someone's house. And there are so many things going on in one Talmud's mind. And how about a group of Talmidim? How about 30, 40, 50 Talmidim? So L'maisa, it's a job. If you pay an English teacher lahavdil, Avada Rebbe has to be paid. It's not a charity, it's not a bizoyna Torah, it's the hechrich of Torah. And Takeda Dvar Shmuel, in that truth that I mentioned, he says, when it becomes a job, then it's natural. You work, you get paid. It's only taking money for learning per se. And that's why Rabbanim today, who are involved with their balabatim, with their family life, with shalom bayis and shidduchim, avada, that is mutta l'chol hadayis. Now, there is a different issue that I'm not going to get into today, and that's Sif Hey, the Gemara in the Dar, ma'ani b'chinam avata b'chinam, but that's a different sugi. What's a little more of an issue is the kollel concept. See, the kollel concept is not a job working with other people. It's a big job if you're learning v'izdav design, of course, but it's learning, getting paid for learning. In fact, some kollel have a shmiyah starim or matzori Shabbos, and it's mamash, you get paid per hour. So there it's not a job like a regular job. There he's getting paid for learning, and sometimes it's per hour. So it's probable that in the Rambam, B'shaitai would not consent. He's getting money for learning. But Lamaisa, as we see it today, that Ara Noises Noisav, the kollel, has produced Gedolei Torah, has produced an Avir of Torah in the city where it is. Rav Moshe was asked in Chelik Beis Yeredeya, Siman Kuf Tezayim, this very question: is it something wrong with taking money for kollel learning? Should a person try to avoid it? And Rav Moshe says, what's the problem? We already the Ramah already was matir. We don't pass like the Rambam. He says, bemes, that today we can't manage without it. And then he says, is niskabel b'chol hadoros, and there's nothing wrong. You want to be machmir? Zok Rav Moshe, don't be machmir. Because the Gemara says even Rishonim Kamalachim, I guess he meant Harba Asav Lo Ya'ilu, even they couldn't do it in those days, and you're going to do it? And he says, we don't have the same men that they had, and we don't have the same women that they had. They were able to survive on nothing. And he says, if someone wants to be machmir, you should know it's only the atzas Yissachar to get him out of learning. Because if you don't take money, and you'll struggle ahin and struggle aher, and next week it's all over. Next week, next year. And Moshe held, it's also to be machmir. In the sefer, in the Sivas Or, there's a discussion of Yisrael Salam to his Talmidim. They also wanted to be prush about take money. He says, nothing doing. The stipend in the Kraina, in Chelik Avsim and in Beis, he says, very often it's not tzidkis, bimachmir, it's gaiva, and it's pasmanish. He also says this, let's just do what has to be done. The Yamsha Shloima, talking about Dairis earlier, in Chul and Perigimel, Simon Tes, regarding Rabbanim, says the same thing. Don't be machmer and not take money because it won't last. A person has to have the financial stability. Don't forget, afilu bal ishu banim is the hardest thing to do. If you deserve it, take the money. This is also important to mention because Lamaisa, there's another heta. And this is probably the main heta of kollel today and bechlal. I saw this in the Seder Hayoim, one of the Kadmoinim, in Seder Asakov. Our Chaim HaKadosh says this in his Svarim, and the Chashulchan spells it out mamish clearly in Reish Mem Vav Siv Mem, that even the Rambam's problem was when the Loimet Torah asks for help, he hints for help, but he's the one that's asking for the help, so he's making Torah billig. But let's say the people of the city want a kollel, or they want a yeshiva, they want a rav. They are asking the Loimet Torah to work for them. That's not a bazayim. That's a beautiful recognition that every city has to have a Torah center. Zok the Chashulchan, Gam Rambam ain't a cholik only when a tzibah mit mekabel aleim lachzikoi. In that case, pshita zeu kavod Torah, and it's very, very mistaver. You see today, Taka, the beautiful growth of kollel, and Taka sent young light around the world to found kollel. I'm just going to pick two mishalim. There are many more, but you look at the two cities, Toronto and Chicago. Those days there was a midbashmala. Now it's mamish. They're both ir ve'ein b'Yisrael. A big part of it was the kollel and the yeshivas. So this is really the or noises noisa that you have in every single city, and even in Brooklyn. There's a lot of learning going on, but every kollel adds. Certainly it brings Loim de Torah, Gedolei Torah. The Chazon Ish in a letter implores people. He says, you think about national security and you're talking about askonis and klal work. The most important thing for Klal Yisrael is producing Gedolei Torah, Paiskim, Moyer Hayra. So the kollel is really a toiva for the Zevuluns. And the Zevuluns are asking the Yissachars come to our city. So that's why this kollel today is definitely very much mutter, even like the Rambam. Now, again, the Ramah already recognizes if the Rav or the younger man has enough panasa and he's taka financially stable, and chanami. But like we saw, sometimes a person will lose his cheshik if he has a certain achrayas. He feels he's taking money for learning. He feels a chayshim mishpat chiyuv. No, that's a cheshbon. But at the end of the day, Taka, as we saw, that the Paiskim say, B'derech klal, harba osav lo ilu. This is the only way to keep the fire of Torah, like eis lasid Hashem eferu Torah sech. The Rav, of course, that needs panasa, a Rebbe needs panasa, and now the question is our question we began with. You have a young bacha, and his parents are very helpful, and they give him everything he needs. He does not need the money, period. Is anything wrong from taking money for learning per hour on a chalamoid, bein hazmanim, etc.? So Lamaisa, according to the Rambam, Taka, this would be a problem. No doubt about it. He doesn't need it. Not even foreseeable future. Now, we just saw that a wealthy Rav doesn't take money. So why should a bacha take money? The only point that we could say is, and I've heard this from other people, if he doesn't take money this bein hazmanim, fine. He won't come next bein hazmanim because because it wasn't financially beneficial for him. we are very much, human nature is, we work with incentive. You know, they say money talks, but in America, money screams. Not just talks. Person walks out with bein hazmanim, with some money, even if he doesn't need it, but it's that shaloi lishma, that's bo lishma. Plus the quality of learning, as we said, is a better learning. You feel an achrayis, you can't come late, you're taking money. So what I think makes sense, and someone told me he saw a letter from Rav Shach, he couldn't find it, but Rav Shach said, take the money, because if you don't take it, you're not going to learn. So we could say if someone has any tzad that it's going to improve his learning, whether it's his devotion to learning, the quality of learning, take his to hate. Once you know, even a suffix, it's not aus just the money, but it's aus the Torah, we're back to our sugya. And our sugya says, the ikki is eis lases lashem, and don't worry about the afer teresech, it's not true in our times. So basically, again, unless an exceptional case, a person feels he doesn't need it, a bacha, no. If he knows himself, and he's not worried about al-tamim ba'atzmecha, then anechanami, there would be a tzad not to take it. But I have not yet seen that if you take the money, you lose the schar. That doesn't, there's no makar for that. The Rambam holds the avla is the bezoyin of Torah. But not that you lose schar. I mean, maybe noit l'chayiv, I don't want to get into that. But to lose schar, that connection I did not yet find. Rav Moshe was asked in the Yeridei Chel Gimel Simon Pei Zayin about a yeshiva that started a program of learning Masechtas. I guess in those days they also worried about that Torah and the yeshiva made a big program, and he gave not money, but they gave a lot of kavod. And some people felt you're giving kavod to learn. So Moshe says it's a great idea, and you got it right, because kavod is better than money. So the honor you give the Talmud is even better than money. And Rav Moshe Taka says that Lamaisa, the piercing of kavod is more than the zeros of prizes, and if that excites the bochur to learn more, why not? So Rav Moshe's approach also is, know mi v'mi aholchem. Rav Moshe learned Torah Lishma. They say about Rav Moshe and his brothers that they learned me and of the goyins as Torah Lishma. So he knew about learning, but he knew, I guess, the American mind is, what's in it for me? So as long as the benefit is to Torah, avad yesh lahak. Then I found in the sefer Derech Sicha, it's on the Parshiyos, they quote Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky's Chelik Aleph Amud Ayin Ches, that he said that his father was very against giving monetary prizes for learning, b'chlal, and giving prasim, was against it. He says, you're teaching them to learn to get. And then he says a story, the Panovich Rav once made up with some bochurim. He was also very much into getting more learning, and even if it means putting down money to give an incentive. And he once made a group of bochurim a deal that if they finished kach v'kach, he's going to give them kach v'kach. When the Heilig Chazon Ish heard about this, he sent a shliach, don't take the money. You don't take money for learning. So obviously, this and Rav Moshe don't really shtim. But I guess part of the teretz is the Chazon Ish, Panovich Rabbi talking about a long time ago. Chazon Ish is already niftas, close 75 years ago. Then there were people, I guess like us, when we grew up, we didn't get paid per hour. We learned, hopefully, and I'm always got a prize, but no one learned like this today. It's a different world with a different expectation. So maybe, but definitely, those that are in chinuch know that today the prizes do wonders. It gives us an incentive. So avad, if someone does it, 100% yesh al milismach. This is really what we discussed till now. The next question is a fascinating question, and that is really the Yissachar Zevulun. How does it work? And what bothered me is, did the Rambam hold it's also to make a Yissachar Zevulun? It's hard to believe because it's a pasuk. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch quotes Rabbi Yerucham, who's a Rishon, so the Rambam could argue on Rabbi Yerucham, but in essence, it's a pasuk. It's a Gemara about Shimon Achi Azariah. So Lamaisa, as I told you earlier, in Saita Chaf Aleph, we find this concept. The Shulchan Aruch quotes it in Sif Aleph, but the kasha is on the Rambam. And Taka de Halacha in Siman Kuf Nun Vav, at the end of a long article, he says, he quotes the Rambam, Yissachar uzvulun yoichiach, not like the Rambam. The Chaim HaKadosh also points this out, that the Rambam is at odds with Yissachar Zvulun. But I was thinking it can't be the Rambam ignored the Yissachar Zvulun. So I was thinking the way the Mechaber projects Yissachar Zvulun It's not to help the Nebuchadnezzar, the poor Yissachar. The Rambam says the Yissachar Zevulun is for the Zevulun, because this is the Tal of Chaim of Tchias HaMeisim, and without it, there's nothing. So Ma Yasa Ben, a person's a big CEO making a lot of money, how's he going to survive? But in Chayin Netzach. That's what Yissachar is there for. The Yissachar is there to service the Zevulun. Oy Bazay, it's not a bezoyin of Torah, it's a cover of Torah. That this big CEO of multi-millionaire, he knows that he has nothing without Torah. And he pays someone that he should have a chelik of Torah. And that's taka why l'chayra, there's no problem of Yissachar Zevulun like the Rambam. And Punk last night, definitely b'schus HaRabbim, I found in Matizyo, Salman Sefer, Shchain Levracha, Manas Chaim Kenyanim Chelik Aleph, Simon Kuf, Mem Tes, something that I heard about, but he gives you the Maramakum. He says the Pella is that the Rambam himself, in the beginning of his life, had a Yissachar Zevulun. He taka worked at the end of his life as a private physician for the Sultan, but he had a brother, and there's a letter printed in the Geras HaRambam. He has the whole letter, the Ayin Sham, but he has a letter when the brother passed away. He spoke beautifully about the brother, how devoted he was, and he writes, "Hu haynois v'noisim b'shuk u'marviach." He would make money by Ni Hayisi Yoshiv lebetach and Haven betalmuda betalmud. I was learning. So Mateo puts it very dramatically. He wrote with his own pen in Yad HaChazaka and Pirish Mishnayos that you can't take money, and he was enjoying Yissachar Zevulun. As a shtim, Torah is not a stira. Yissachar Zevulun, his lashon is, this is a Torah sheyesh my malacha. This is a partnership. This is a deal. This is a financial agreement. You have to write a star. There are tnoyim. So it's not that he's taking money for learning. He's supporting the Zevulun. So I was very relieved that even the Ram himself had it. So that also, Agav, the Tashbitz's criticism, oh, the Rambam, he learned he had a private doctor. He had some tough times also, I guess. His brother supported him. What happened before his brother supported him? But be that as it may, this is definitely the clarity in the sugya. Yissachar Zevulun is mutter even like the Rambam, and we once spoke about a different Ayin Sham, that the pratim and pratim. I'm sure many of you wonder about this question now, that it's a questionable and being nana. So how do I learn every day? I enjoy learning. I'm talking about you. I enjoy learning so much, so I'm being nana with the Vei Torah. So that's not a bad question. You know, the Chaim HaKadosh speaks about the Erevis, the Adidas, the Neimas, the Masikas of Torah. It's something that's, if you don't experience it, you can't imagine the greatness of it. Why is that mutter? So this is the famous Yesod of the Eglei Tal and the Akdama, where he says, I heard people make a mistake, and they toya miderech haseichel, and they think if you enjoy learning, that's a chasar in the learning, it's shaloi l'shma. He says that's a toyas meforsim adar, but the ikka mitzvahs limud ha'toyram iliyasas v'sameach u'misaneg bilamudai v'oz divrei Torah nivloyim b'damai. And therefore he says that if when you learn with enjoyment, with pleasure, with taiva, it becomes nivloyim b'damai, and the Eitzah Toiv is this gadol with that simcha, it can't be a chasar of Torah l'shma. I once heard, I think Rabbi Nosson Vachweigel, he pointed out that you say Varev Nashem Alekeinu in the Bechta Torah, and then you end off with Loim Deis Torah Lishma. So it's a progression. If you start with the Revis Torah, you'll end up in Torah Lishma. It's not a stira. And this Yesod is always kedai to mention, especially before Shavuos. The Ikka Simcha is Ilav Hayoyim Yoyis Ikka B'Shukam, the Geshmak of Torah. And the truth is, the Kvar Kidmai, the Eglei Tal is not the first one. There's a famous Rabbi Avram and Nahar, one of the Rishonim, in Masechet Nedarim, Daf Memches Amud Aleph, who says this exact lashon, that Mitzvah Talmud Torah was given to be nene. There's no din of lav lahanas din in limud Torah. So that's one hana that not only is mutter but is recommendable. I'll tell you, it happens in Yeshiva all the time. I'll paint one scenario. Ruvain borrows a sefer from Shimon, okay, and he lost it. It wasn't a pshia; it was an oinus. He lost the sefer. So Ruvain says, "I'm sorry to tell you the bad news that I lost your sefer." Shimon says, "Not bad news. Pay me." Ruvain says, "I'm not paying you." Why not? I lost it. I know, but you're a shoyel, right? Shoyel is chayiv and einsim. So Reuben's alarmed and he goes, you don't understand. Why is a shoyl chayiv and oinsim? Because kol nashaloi. But I was learning Torah, and I'm learning Torah, it's mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. So it's no hana. And therefore it's not kol nashaloi, and therefore I am potter. Who says it besides this bacha? The Ktsois HaChoishin in Siman Ayin Beis, Sivkot Lamed Aleph. Zogt in the Sivis in Beurim on that Siman, Sivkot Yezayin, the Ktsois forgot a big aside. That Torah is lahanis nitnu. And therefore, if it's there for pleasure, it is called nashaloi, and you got to pay for the law sefer. So it's not just a nice chizuk, it's a reality in Choshe Mishpat. That Torah is given lahanis nitnu. There's one situation that I must mention that Taka all agree is a problem. The Ramah himself quotes this, and that is when the Yissachar, when he takes money, or the Rav, whatever it is, he doesn't take it, he asks for it, hints for it, or demands it. And that the Tazir Lashon, I think, says it all in Sivkot and Zayim. He says, a kir gadol, when ksasim lehutin achri hamamen, when the learning, the Leimed Torah, and toivim b'fiyem, give me matanais, that's a bezoyin of Torah. And I guess the point is, it's similar to the koyin hamasiyel based agranos. Even though a koyin has the Torah rights to get supported from Klal Yisrael, but has to be with a certain dignity, a certain stolz, a certain kavod Torah. But to lower it, Zok the Taz, it's an ovain gadol, and he concludes with sadik b'emunasa yichya. See, it's a hard thing to do, to walk on that tightrope, that a person has to feel the guy with the kedusha that the aura nois is noisav, and yoisem mashav alabayis oisla ani oisla balabayis. So if he feels like a schnorrer and a schlep and he projects himself like that, then the Yissachar is being mavazir the Torah. And the Taz has a big problem with this. There has to be a certain dignity, not to ask, not to to hope. If he wants to give, good. But the Talmid Chacham has to represent this exceptional kavod HaTorah. We all know the Gemara in Ksubis Kufay Med Beis, Kalamevi Doirin LaTalmid Chacham Kilo Makriv Bikurim Zok the Taz, that really Taka Matana should be Asa maybe, Kusayna Matana Yichya. But in this case, the Paiskim say Fakert, by giving the Talmid Chacham, a person is gaining. In fact, there are Gedolei Paiskim that tell to an interesting concept. That when a person, a Talmid Chacham, a Chashaviyah takes something from you, it's hana. He takes from me, and you can make a kedushin. But he know that the makabel on a Kabbalah becomes an asina, and asina is a Kabbalah. So when a Talmid Chacham takes your gift, you're gaining, and that's the win-win attitude that this world operates on. The Talmid Chacham takes the money with great hakaras hatoiv, obviously. But the one that's giving it feels he's getting the better deal. It's a win-win situation. And that's why it's true. And maybe during Talmid Chacham Gilu Makrib Bikurim, and that overrides Sayna Matanas Yichya, and that's why Talmid Chacham takes someone else. It's not Sayna Matanas Yichya at all. It is doing a chesed. And this is the way the system works so beautifully. Taka, I must mention that there were Gedolim that never took a penny from anybody. To do with the Chazon Ish, he lived in abject poverty, and once a Yid from Europe a wealthy Yid came to visit him, and he expected the Melech Yisrael. Chazon Ish was the Mamish Melech Yisrael, was living in a mansion, and the Mamish in a little hole in the wall. So he took out a big wad of bills and he put it on the Chazon Ish's table. Here, take this. Chazon Ish smiled like this is the furthest thing from his mind. He said, no, thank you. Must left them Rebbe. See, with a twinkle eye, he says, Ich left them Tanayir HaToiva. Taivas Adam Chazir, that was his panasa. And the Taz, Taka says this, but he does say, don't forget, that Lamaisa, when a person doesn't need it, and a Chanami, don't take. But more often than not, we're back to our Moshe side, don't be firmer than the system, it's not going to work. But definitely, if you know Talmid Chacham does not want to take B'Shemoifin, it's based on this Shita, he could manage, and he's Taka from the B'Shem B'Yachai group, that he could do it for also biyadi. Another point that I should mention is when a person does give a Talmid Chacham, the Lashon is Hamevi Dorim Talmid Chacham. I saw a very nice diuk. It's a pasha pshat. you give it yourself. Don't send it with a car service. If you think it's a cheshivas, aidei atzman, but not to send it with a messenger. That's why some taka didn't like the idea that Purim, everybody decides to give aidei shliach. You send to your Rebbe shliach. The whole shliach thing is a chumrah that some say. But the covet and the ava that creates by giving yourself is a much better bet. I saw an interesting shaila, which is mamash our sugya, the Chelkas Yaakov with Rav in Zurich. He says, we had a question from New York. I felt pretty excited. He says there are certain stores that give a discount for kollel. And then he adds, and Chevra's telephone. This is interesting. The telephone company also gives hanach if you're learning. I guess in those days there was some type of a clergy exemption or a clergy discount. So he has from stores and from the telephone company. A guy, is that a problem of the da'shtamish betagah cholel? That's the yes to Chelkas Yaakov. So he says, l'chari, there's a mishnah, hanehna midivei Torah noit l'chayev. He says no, because, and Mamash says, like we said earlier, if they're giving it on their own, you're not asking, they feel honored to help a loyim Torah. Even the government has some type of clergy discount. So that's something that's covered. And he quotes the Gemara in Bava Metzia, Samachei, you have to help a Tamachacha make parnasa. So this is not a chisaron, and probably even the Rambam would agree, as I told you earlier, that if the person on his own initiative gives, if he gives, you're allowed to take. Now, just as true, if there's a long line and a Tam Chacham wants to cut the line because you're Tam Chacham, that's an avla. That's a Chal Hashem. If they want to let you go first, okay. But to push you away and flash your clergy card or Tam Chacham card, that's the problem. I know Rabbi Yank was waiting in line and someone said go first and he refused to go first. I don't know if it was just his edelkeit, maybe he felt it's a shtickle bazar. I don't know what the point is. But one thing that I should mention, when the giver is doing it b'leiv shalom on his own initiative, that is true kavod Torah. And I must mention today, this is the credit of Klal Yisrael, this relatively new movement of Chazdei Leiv that's bringing kavod Torah to the world in an unprecedented way. People giving groise gelten, working hours and hours and days and weeks just to make it easier for Rabbi and kollel galait is a kavod Torah in the sense to oifen. It's working in the win-win situation. They are exciting Klal Yisrael to give to Loim Dei Torah. It's something that's really a dream as far as the right way of doing things. The Gemara says in Masechta Nedarim Samach Beis that a person's allowed to identify himself. He comes to a city, they don't know who he is, he's allowed to say who I am. Frek the Gemara, what was the problem with Reb Tarfon? He said his name and he felt so bad because he could have done it ba'oifen acher. But zokt the Gemara that basically you're allowed to say that who you are when you come to a new place. And this Gepaskin in the Ramah an hour Siman Chaf Aleph Umutta letzur mirabana ledui nafshay ba'asher loy yadinalei. But the Paiskim say if it's not needed, then don't say, and don't even. And the Paiskim point out when you don't have to, don't stress that you're a Talmid Chacham. And that's why in my house over the years I've gotten phone calls. I once picked the phone. Who is this? Avram Pam. I said who? Oh, Rav Pam. Okay. Then we got the phone call Yakov Perlau. I said who? That was the Minsky Rebbe. And I once got a call. This is Belsky. That's not even the first name. So this is the kavod Torah that people are not projecting their image. But basically, the Paiskim say if they don't know who you are, so you're allowed to say. But it's not because you want to covet. Listen to what the Rosh on the page in Masechet Nedarim says. Why taka do you have to say? And they don't know, so they won't give you. You won't get shlishi. What's wrong? So the Rosh Kadesh lo yizalzlu b'chvay Torah v'yanshu. They might not know who you are and treat you like a regular person, and they're playing with fire. Don't forget the Mishnah Avos about the bezoyin of the chaymer of bezoyin Talmid Chacham, and Zok the Rosh. That's why you must say. In fact, the Rashba in a Tshuva Chelik Aleph Siman Pei Dalet, he says, why is the Gemara use a mild lashon of he's allowed to? It should say chayiv. If the reason is to prevent a unknowing bezoyin HaTorah, it's still a bezoyin HaTorah. It should be chayiv. It should be a chayiv. So basically we see that everybody has to do their part to make it work.
there is a Chasam Sofer in the tshuva, a new dimension of our sugya in Archaim, the beginning of Reish Ches. It's a famous tshuva, but if you look at it inside, you see that it's not a long tshuva that he developed as chiddush. It's mamish kilachayad, about nothing about this particular prat. But he says, oh, you wrote a sefer? I got your sefer. You wrote the Maitzchias. I got your sefer. And by the way, we all know that if you print a sefer and it's not Kul Hashem Shemayim, you're in for a lot of trouble. Why? And the lashon is because if you're doing it for covet, then you're being violating the Mishnah Avos. You should make a dאשתמש atag chalaf. And then he adds a Chasam Sofer chiddush. He says, really, dvarm shebal peh iyat Hashem l'koyso. You're not allowed to write it. But eis last Hashem efer teresecha, you're allowed to write it. But if you're printing a sefer for me and yagadol, not eis last Hashem, you're over this issa of Torah shebal peh. You're not allowed to print. And this is the Chasam Sofer's chiddush. Again, it's not about the whole tshuva; it's about something else. But he throws it in 2 lines. So Lamaisa, the later Paiskim wonder. In the worst scenario, it's the Gemara, which the Mechaber quotes in Sif Hey. L'oil miyasik adam b'Torah shaloi lishma, b'Torah shaloi lishma bo lishma. That's the Mechaber, in Sif Chav. So what's the problem if you print shaloi lishma? And don't forget, it's a procedure, l'oilam. It's a way to do it. You start shaloi lishma bo lishma. But there's another big taina in the Chasam Sofer, and that's the Beis Meir's taina in the Akdama to Even Ezer. He says, I'm worried about printing because it's not lishma. But he says basically the aside, and I saw again arichas you want to see inside the Afar Kasta de Anya Chelik Av Siman Beis, the Akdam al Haras Nasan has a beautiful tshuva Chelik Hey, and they all say that in Chanami originally there was a heta lafer Torah secha, but once they were matter writing Torah lishma, it's mutter across the board. Not only if you are a situation, if you do it for yourself, it's also good, as long as there was once a heta. And also, what's wrong with saying it's mutal to Torah lishma bo lishma? So that's why these Paiskim, again, the Haras Nasan was an Einik Chasam Sofer, and he wrote many svarim, so he tried to defend his approach. And that's the 2 aterim. Number 1, it's worse Torah lishma, and once it's a het gama. What's important to mention, the Mishnah Avos that I mentioned, it's twice, Aleph Yud Gimel and Dal Zayim, dאשתמש בתגא chalaf. Pashut, it means you're gaining with the crown of Torah. Zok Shach, another pshat, he says, the simple pshat, I'm sorry, the Shach said the simple pshat, but then he adds, and that's where the more really adds it, based on Avos Rab Nasan. Kol ha-mishtamish b'shem ha-mefurish ein lo chelik l'olam haba. In other words, as the Ramah says, v'yashayim d'zeh ha-mishtamish b'shemus. And this is something that needs a little bit of a mention, because using shemus and skulas and kemeis is playing with fire. It's shemus Hashem. And if you don't know what you're doing, then don't do it. And the Mishnah is talking about that, and there are more quotes this as a shita. A lot has to be said, but Haras Nasan in a Tshuva Chelik Vav Pei Gimel puts it very well. He says today this is a terrible plague. In Eretz Yisrael, you go, pardon me, they're mekubalim, cheaper by a dozen. The stipler says they're not mekubalim, they're mekablim, money. And there's stories about the stipler. Someone, Yakov Hill, sein gesund, brought a Chasam Kalatim that they were engaged, and they went to a mekubal, whatever. And he said, it's not a good shidduch because the names don't stim. And they got frightened. Not a good shidduch. So he came to the stipler and he started yelling and screaming. The family came running. They said, what's happening? And they told him, the story goes, oh, don't you know that bothers him? And they told everybody to leave. He was so irritated how people are resorting things, and the way the Haras Nasan says it, it's Isuri Deraisa on both ends in the most chamadik Isurim. So just to mention, it's part of our sugya. The dאשתמש atag chalaf is going to mekubalim unless they're 100% certified, but it's chashdeyu v'chashdeyu, and then if you have a heta, no. But we have our b'tzadik b'manasa yichya, that's the way to do it. The Shach has another pshat on this dאשתמש atag chalaf, based on Gemara Megillah, that someone that's mishtamish with a Talmud Chacham, who makes a Talmud Chacham work for him. The great Sabar and Kotler never allowed a bochur to do anything for him. He felt it wasn't covered at Torah. So, Anan Manena Basrei. But the point is, we're talking about Talmid Chacham, that if there's so much chiyuv of covered at Torah, how much for the Lamed Torah? You know, there's a Sefer Chaim, the Maral's brother, he has a beautiful insight. He says that we know that the Gemara says a makis, if you stand up for a Sefer Torah but not for a Talmid Chacham, it's a mishagas. Don't you realize that Talmid Chacham is more than the Sefer Torah? He says, and how about if you don't treat a Talmid Chacham properly? If you take a Sefer Torah, chas v'shalom, out of the ark and throw it on the floor, it'll be a tinus, it will be terrible, a tragedy. And if you mistreat a Talmid Chacham, so this is part of the da'ashtmeš betagah means you're not properly respecting a Talmid Chacham. That's something, of course, that is really our sugya. So the point, I guess, the asay toiv of it is treating a Talmid Chacham like a Sefer Torah is really part of the chiyuv of the Mishnah. And last but not least, I think it's a very befitting conclusion. The Ramah in the end of Siv Chav Aleph, based on a Gois Ashri in Masechet Avodah Zarah, says the Shari Talmid Chacham lemitem midi mi hayra asay k'tei levara hayra asav aval likach matana or davachashiv is asa. In other words, if you're a Rav, not a mashgiach is getting paid, it's a different story. You're a Rav, and someone comes to you with a pot of soup, chicken, and it's a big shaila. And you look at it, whatever, you paskin is mutter. So to get paid for that psak is wrong. I mean, he gets paid for his job, but not for that psak. Take a matana, a big bowl of soup is wrong. But a little bit is mutter. Now the question is, if it's taka mutter, it's mutter. Asa is asa. Is it din chatzi shir? But the question, I guess the mystery continues, the Amshel Shloim in Chulin Gimel Ches says it's a minig yafa, and I saw that being done. Balei Hayra, typically take a taste of the soup. Not a lot, not a matana, a little bit. So now it's really surprising. If it's mutter, take a lot. If it's not, why a little bit mutter? A little bit tarfus is mutter. So you remember, you look at the Rav Shulchan Aruch, but it's really Mechaber's Lashon. Taking a little bit, taking a lot is going to cause a sense of chshad. As Levush says, likach dav chashiv is vaday asa umaybe atzmei chashad. People say, the Rav, you pay him well, he passes on you also. You know, if there's a will, there's a rabbinic way, they say. You know, in other words, don't worry. That's no good, terrible. So why a little bit? Listen to this cheshbon. Because the person thinks maybe the Rav's only make a b'di'evet. If the Rav took a little bit, I'm very happy. And that is true kavod Torah. The Rav that's thinking of the people in such a beautiful way that he's willing to take a little bit of soup just to make the person more easy. What does kavod Torah mean? People do foolish things. Kavod Torah. What does it really mean? Dr. Meiri says that a person that is ma'ater the Torah with noyam hamidos, shezeu vade kavod Torah liyas leim dem mesulsel ubal midas nechbados. That is mechaber the Torah. Guten Tag and am freilichen simcha dike Yom Tov.
Shame, irgendwie ist like a big shikayah to us with today's share. Have the great sponsoring your share. Call Yeshiva 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Hananya ben Akasha Omer. Wat zeggen dus bochur zaken is zelf weer hebben om te met zijn naam alle neu gofets man sitka jagdel te wiader.
Hey. Hey. Amen.
Okay, Rabbi, so we're not paying anybody to stay for the seeking, but it's worth staying and get have enough from it.
Okay, first of all, the machlokes, the Ram on the other Rishonim is something probably unprecedented. Such a Mesiras Nefesh, the Ram had to get a sheet, even though he knew he was literally a low in voice. But halacha, it's mutter, and in most cases, as we proved, even like the Rambam today will be mutter. Basically, the point is because it's not a bezoyin of Torah, it's the cover of Torah, it's the nitzchis of Torah. But the main issa is when a person is mevazer the Torah by stooping to become a shnara, a nitzrach, when he's really the crown of the Bernstein's world. Today, if the Noisnim want it, they want the Rabbi to be to take care of the Talmidim, they want the Rav to take care of the Tzibur, that is definitely mutter, that is the toiva of the ones that are paying. It's the national security of Klal Yisrael. There has to be Laim Torah, and even in a case where it would be awesome, but the Rambam holds to be mutter al teis las Hashem efeiru Torah secha. The heta of doing a job is even a bigger heta, but kollel, even though it's not a job in that sense, but that's the public service. That's the or noises noisav. The poskim say not to be machmir because a person will end up leaving the learning, the schus of learning, because he can't manage. In the rare case that someone doesn't need the money and the learning won't be affected, then there's what to be machmir. But again, bochur that don't need money, as we said, typically it's better to take money and make sure that learning will take the most its importance that for the next bein hazmanim. But if someone feels he mamish will learn just as well and not going to help him, no. Yesh lahachim if he wants, but I can't say that's the right thing. He has to make sure learning will go on. The Chazon Ish and the Stipler both didn't like giving prizes, whether it's covered or financial prizes, but the Minig Olam has become to give it in recent days especially. We live with the what's in it to me attitude. But all agree Yissachar will mutter, even like the Rambam, because that's a real partnership, it's a real deal. The geschmack of learning is the tzuras mitzvah, the chefza mitzvah. It's nevloim bedamei. It's not chas v'shalom a chsar in the mitzvah, and therefore we borrow a sefer and you lost it. It's machlokes. We have to pay bichlal because some say mitzvahs Torah is lehanas nitnu, and that works out as a chumrah in this case. The issa is when a person asks for something that taka shouldn't happen, but lamaisa when someone wants to give matana b'leiv shalom about it, he could take it. Talmid Chacham should accept the matanas. He's doing more than the person's giving. The kollel discount and all these other stores are doing a wonderful service. Chazal is doing an unbelievable service. Cutting the lines or using rights of Talmid Chacham is takab. That's the problem. That's the bezoyin. When a person has avoiding the bezoyin should be done at all costs. Some sefer is chiddush that you have to write a sefer only lishma and print lishma. It's not ma'isa. The minhag is not to be choishish for that, or better yet, try to do it lishma. Some Zalman says do it lishma. But that shouldn't be a reason not to print the sefer. And as we said, basically, the Talmid Chacham takes food and tastes it. That's a cover of Torah that shows that was Torah dem gemach.